When I was 16, I made the monumentally bad decision to run away from home and live with my boyfriend at the time, Brad, who was 19. One of my best friends who was also my age, let's call her Bethany, and her boyfriend Ivan, 23. I can't even begin to enumerate all of the bad ways in which this was a horrible idea and a bad situation, but I was a very stupid teenager, and it seemed adventurous and fun, and I was exhilarated by the lifestyle these men were living. My absolute best friend at the time, who was also my age, was dating a 20-year-old. Her name was Christy and his name was Alex. He was selling psychedelic magic mushrooms. He would always give us a first taste, so he could get a general idea of how strong they were and how much to charge for them. For some reason that I can't even begin to recall right now, Ivan and Bethany were out of town, and Christy and Alex were staying in the master bedroom for the weekend. There were several white caps in Alex's most recent batch, and those were the ones that we were eating. Over the course of a few hours, my boyfriend and I were growing restless with how long it had taken the drugs to kick in, and stupidly ended up eating 7 grams between us. It didn't take long after the last dose for me to start tripping. It was a very hard, uncomfortable and intense trip. I remember that it took the drugs longer to hit my boyfriend, so he had to watch me for about an hour whilst I had a temporary psychological breakdown. I won't go into what I experienced during the trip, because that really isn't the point of the story. But, against advice, I ended up forcing myself to throw up everything that I could, and then the trip as quickly as possible. Alex and Christy were already in bed. After I'd thrown up, I was fine for the most part. I was coming down, and I went to lie down with my boyfriend in the dark. And that is when he started tripping. He was thinking very cyclically, and repeating the words to Tool songs as if they were Bible passages. One minute I was doing my level best to calm him down and reassure him, and the next minute he was on top of me, with my head between his hands, trying to break my neck. He didn't try for very long, but I didn't try to run immediately after he stopped, because I was between him and a wall, and he was much, much larger than me, and I wasn't sure if I could make it. Seeing no other option, I soothed him whilst trying to construct an escape. He had tried to break my neck twice more before an out presented itself. I actually have no idea how I survived this, because he was absolutely physically capable of doing it. A short time after his third attempt to kill me, he somehow decided that we needed to get married. He picked me up and started to carry me, completely naked, into the bedroom where Alex and Chrissy were, and somehow convinced one of them they could perform legal marriage rites. This was the best opportunity I'd seen to escape, so I did. Before I could get into the bedroom, I fought him like a wild animal, clawing and writhing and screaming like a banshee. Finally, he lost his grip on me, and I fell, then scrambled into the bathroom and locked the door. I vaguely remember knocking over a chair as I ran to slow him down. As soon as I locked the door, I started to hear a commotion on the other side. There was yelling and scuffling and unintelligible babbling. And then someone knocked on the door. I was absolutely terrified of losing my life, so I ignored the knocking and started trying to figure out how to open the sealed bathroom window. After about a minute of this desperate knocking, I realised the knocking was coming from Christy. She'd been yelling the whole time to open the door and let her in. The moment I realised it was her, I unlocked the door without thinking. As soon as I swung the door open, I saw my boyfriend break out of Alex's arms about 5 feet away from the bathroom door. He knocked my friend out of the way and he ran to get me. Alex had thought that he'd been completely immobilized by him, but he was wrong. My boyfriend tackled me to the bathroom floor and redoubled his efforts to break my neck. I remember my head being twisted so far around that I could clearly see the tiny pits in the bathroom tiles behind me. I am incredibly lucky that Alex was there, because I would have probably died if he hadn't have been. He yanked my boyfriend off long enough for Christy to crash into the bathroom with me and locked the door behind her. I was sobbing uncontrollably, naked, bruised, and more terrified than I'd ever been in my entire life. But she was clear-headed enough to impress upon me the importance of getting the hell out of that house. The only clothes that I could find were a wadded up black sweater with a cat decal on the front and a pair of men's boxers, both of which were crusted with dried vomit. My friend finally managed to pry the window open and we crawled outside, covered in vomit. Tears streaked down my bruises. I followed her to a nearby friend's house, Melissa and Walter, for asylum. I was utterly hysterical, and by the time we got there, I'd managed to give my friends a basic outline of what happened. Walter left the apartment exclaiming that he had to find my boyfriend. I even somehow managed to understand it at the time. I knew that his behaviour was just the drugs he was taking, not my boyfriend, and that his safety was important. I won't say that I thought that he had much of a claim to safety, because at that moment I was running on adrenaline and determined to survive, and not at all concerned with justice or rational fairness. But he definitely didn't deserve to be forgotten just because some drugs had affected him adversely. Finally, I managed to calm down on my friend's couch and stop hyperventilating. It was at this point that Walter arrived back home. And who does he have in tow? My psychotic boyfriend, wrapped in a black curtain with pupils the size of saucers. My friends sat back and settled onto the couch next to me and started apologizing profusely for what he'd done. I listened for a couple of minutes, my body tense and rigid. When he started to slip back into cyclical thinking, I learnt then, through his ramblings, that he'd tried to kill me because he thought that God had told him that he had to kill me so that we could be together in heaven. After, I lost the ability to deal with the trauma and stress, disheartened by my friend's inability to see that his proximity was putting me in danger. I jumped from the couch and ran out of the apartment complex. I couldn't face another murder attempt, with or without my friends present. I ran all the way to a nearby friend's apartment and ended up staying there all night, still covered in vomit and tears. I try not to think about how it affected my life, but I'm sure it had a very negative impact, and I'll never, ever forget it. The events of this story occurred when I was approximately age 16 in high school. I am a recovering drug addict, and I abused opiates and cocaine for 4 years before getting clean 21 months ago. Because of this fact, I don't have the best memory about the time period. However, I will do my very best to recall the finest details. I live in the deep south and went to high school in a small medium town with about 30 to 50,000 people. Because the town is not the greatest size, there were not very many things to do on weeknights, or weekends either for that matter. This was before I got into my big partying phase. Again, I was 16. You could choose to go between the movies, browsing the mall, having dinner somewhere, or going to Broad Street. Broad Street was the main street in downtown, pretty much like a main street in most towns that actually have them. In high school, going out there and just walking, or going to see the fountain or the bridges, or go over the many rivers and towns behind it, were a popular thing to do. The bridges over the rivers were also very popular spots for teenagers to smoke pot or just hang out and talk. These bridges were very dimly lit and were barely wide enough to drive cars over. This place was strictly for scenery, walking your dog, or whatever. One night, a few of my friends and I went back there to hang out and waste a Friday night. I didn't smoke pot, and there was another friend of mine there who didn't either. His name was Zach. So whilst my friend started smoking, Zach and I decided just to take a walk over the hill and check out some of the other bridges on the other side. We probably walked a good half mile to a mile away, to the point where if we screamed at them or they screamed at us, we'd be too far to hear. Also because we travelled over other hills and the distance we travelled, we could no longer see our friends or anyone else. It was a cool autumn night and exceptionally dark out. I remember it being one of the darkest nights in living memory. Not especially cloudy, but there was either like no moon or the moon was incredibly small. Being in the area we were in, so far from Broad Street and our friends didn't help either. The only light we had were the very dimly lit lights of the bridge. Zach and I were standing there, looking at the river flow gently beneath us, getting ready to head back to the others when we saw two silhouettes growing larger and larger towards us. It wasn't uncommon for people to walk their dogs back there, even in the late hours of the night. I believe it must have been around 11 PM or so, and it wasn't uncommon for other people to just be doing what they were doing after all. That is what the place is built for. So, at this point, we weren't particularly frightened or anything. Personally, I didn't think anything of it. At this point, we had been gone for about 30 minutes and I assumed they would be finished and start to walk back. Disregarding the dark figures which we could now see in our peripheral vision as we walked, we heard a sharp, loud whistle. One of those that people make by putting two fingers in their mouths and blowing. So we turn around and look. It was the two silhouettes now submerged under the revealing light of the bridge.
Hey, come on over for a few minutes, boys.
They were two middle-aged men. One slightly taller than me, and the other significantly taller than me. They were big dudes and both had completely shaved heads. Bald as can be. And I'll never forget those eyes. The only way to describe them were crazy. Methed out possibly. Maybe crack. They were absolutely delusional. Both were tattooed on their faces and the rest of their bodies we could see, which wasn't much because they were both wearing long, leather black trench coats. The shorter one of the two was holding a brown paper bag. You can tell when a brown paper bag has alcohol or some sort of bottle in it. This one did not. I have no idea what was in the bag. The guys began asking us a lot of questions. Very personal questions, scary questions. They were both quite obviously neo-Nazis, identifiable by their shaved heads and swastika tattoos on their faces. They would ask Zach and I things like,
Do you love your race, boy? Would you do anything for someone of your race?
When confronted with a situation like this, with two drug-induced delusional, presumably killers interrogating you, you pretty much tell them what they want to hear. Yes, sir. I'm very proud to be white. No, sir. Everyone in my family for generations has been white. Zach was raised by a white family, but he looked suspiciously of Native American descent. I often questioned if he was adopted. Then they questioned Zach a bit more.
You boys don't got any mixed blood in you, do ya?
They questioned Zach more and more, but I stood there for him and told them that he was my brother and he was indeed white. After we had convinced them of our racial heritage, they were satisfied that we were white. I thought maybe that would be the end of it and they would let us go. I was wrong. For you to understand why we just didn't say F off, we have to go and then run away. I should explain to you that it was the shorter one of these two men that appeared to have a 9mm pistol, but I could be wrong about the caliber, but it was unmistakably a pistol, hanging slightly out of the opening between his jacket pocket and the front. However, that wasn't even our main concern. He slung around a large knife with his head, almost as if he were forgotten it was there. It was just so casual. It wasn't a pocket knife, it was too large to be. It looked like one of those really large 9 to 10 inch blades that they sell in convenience stores with dragon handles on it.
We aren't from here. We're traveling soldiers for the white race,
he explained. He told us that they were from the state directly above mine, and they were here to purge the unclean. While the second round of the conversation and questioning was going on, an elderly couple, maybe in their 50s or 60s, walked less than 40 yards away from us with their dog. We all just stopped talking and looked at them. In my head, I'm begging to please call the police. I am giving them those "rescue us" eyes. They get past us and put their heads down. It was at this point that the scariest part of the night happened. The shorter one took out his gun. He made my friend Zach and I remember his phone number and remember the name of their army, stating they had a full team of snipers with the sight aimed at our heads right now if we were unable to do so. Obviously there were no snipers on the rooftops, but don't ask me what his reasoning or logic was behind this. People in drug-induced manias don't generally have the best logic or reasoning. The man said it a couple of times and gave me 30 seconds to memorize the number. It was an out-of-state number and was a bit more difficult to naturally memorize, and the name of their terrorist organization was something ridiculously confusing as well. Perhaps it was just the circumstances, but it was the scariest 30 seconds of my life. Remember, repeat, live. Screw up one number and potentially get shot dead on the spot. Obviously not by a team of snipers, but the very real threat was standing right in front of me. The time was up, and I repeated it back, praying to a God that I don't even believe in that it was correct. It was. After repeating it back, they sent us on our way. We immediately took off running to our friends who were no longer there because of the amount of time we'd been gone. We explained to them what happened and called the police. They went out there to search the place, but the guys were gone. The number they'd given me didn't exist, no one had heard of their group, and as far as I know, nothing came from them being in our town, as I never heard anything else. It was the single most frightening night of my entire life, and that is saying something. So please, racist, bigoted, ugly, idiotic scumbag, lower than dirt neo-Nazis, let's not meet again. I've been with my girl for a few months. We were pretty much inseparable, and we spent almost all our free time together. Most of said time was spent smoking weed, drinking and popping pills. Enter Sean. Sean is a 100% confirmed rapist who is locally famous for brutally raping a 14-year-old girl and getting away with it because he had to do it twice before she even went to the police. The guy was inherently mentally unstable and had a ridiculously long list of girls who he'd harassed. Sean was by far the creepiest guy I'd ever met. And of course, he sold weed. In the early morning around 1 AM, we were freaking out at our lack of weed. We wanted to smoke pot and watch Trailer Park Boys all night. And those plans were being thwarted by all of our normal hookups not responding. Contacting Sean was protested, but we were a bit desperate. She called him and he immediately offered to drop it off. She opted to meet him in the Walmart parking lot, and after she got off the phone, she explained to me that Sean was a tad obsessed with her and that he'd stalked her in the past. So she drove us up, and he was getting there on time. Sweet. The guy didn't know I was there, so she'd walked to his car alone, and he made her get into his passenger seat. Being the overprotective guy I am, I immediately noped out of my seat and went to his car. I went to the door, opened it, and said,
"Got the weed?"
Then pulled her out and we walked back to the car. In the car, she informed me that he touched her thigh as they exchanged. I told her to stay away from him, and she agreed that it would be a good idea. So we went back to her house and smoked. He started texting her dozens of messages, calling her a plethora of insults and talking about doing all kinds of things to me. We laughed at him and got high as hell and then turned on Netflix. A good hour into our TV binge session, she gets a phone call from him. She tosses it on speaker when he says, "I'm outside your house." We look out the main window and there he is, standing on the sidewalk, like a jackass. Considering we had pot, used pipes all around the house, and a whole ton of illegally obtained pills, we felt like calling the cops would probably not be a good idea. So we went upstairs and watched him from behind the curtains, freaking out. He stood outside for about an hour or two before leaving. I spent 4 to 5 nights out of the week at her house, and at least 2 of those would include finding him standing around the house or in his car. This went on until he got arrested for drunk driving, where they found a crap ton of the devil's lettuce in his car. So yeah, don't do drugs, kids. Hey guys, it's Mort here and thank you so much for listening. A lot of you said that you wanted longer videos, so here you have it. So if you liked the video, remember to smash the like button. And remember, if you have a scary story that you wish to submit, you can send it over to my email, which can be found in the description below, to have it featured in a future video. Just remember to say that you give me your consent to use it though. Don't forget to subscribe and follow me on Twitter and Instagram for updates and behind the scenes. But anyway, for now guys, I'm going to sign off. Stay awesome, and I'll see you in the next one. One night, I heard my front door open and close. Since it was 4 AM, I went to check it out. I opened the door and found my brother at the far end of the yard, in the snow, only in his underwear, staring right at me. He then waved very slowly